Hollow Creek wasn't a town you could find on any map. Travelers only ever stumbled upon it by accident, usually when they were already lost. Following some forgotten road being swallowed whole by the woods, the locals, the few who spoke, would tell you the town was built around the river, a slow black current that seemed to shimmer even on moonless nights. They said it whispered when the wind blew, and they had learned long ago not to listen too closely. They believed the water carried voices, the voices of those who never left. When Emma Ward arrived, it was late autumn. The fog was so thick she nearly drove her car straight into that black river before the crooked town sign materialized from the mist. Welcome to Hollow Creek, population unknown. She'd come seeking solitude, a small cabin by the water where she could finally finish her novel in peace. But peace was the one thing Hollow Creek had buried a long, long time ago. She remembered the realtor's smile, how it was just a little too tight when he handed her the keys. Don't stay out after dark, he'd warned, his eyes darting nervously toward the river, and if you hear your name being called, don't answer. She had laughed it off back then, dismissing it as some quaint, backwoods superstition. That first night, she unpacked by the dim glow of candlelight. The cabin was small, rustic, built from gray timber, its windows facing the water. A strange metallic scent hung in the air, like the promise of rain that never fell. Stepping onto the porch, she watched the fog move like a living thing, like breath, and then she heard it, a sound from somewhere across the river, like a child humming a nursery rhyme. The humming stopped the moment she whispered, "Hello." The first few days passed quietly. Emma fell into a routine, writing in the mornings, reading by the fire at night. The town itself was strange shops with boarded-up windows, people who stared for too long but spoke too little. Whenever she asked about the river, they'd all give her the same chilling answer. It remembers. On the fourth night, the humming returned, but this time it was closer. She stepped outside again, her flashlight trembling in her hand, but its beam could barely pierce the dense mist. Then, across the river, she saw it, a faint movement, a figure, small and pale, standing near the water's edge. "Are you all right?" she called out, her voice shaking. The figure tilted its head, and then, in a child's voice that carried unnaturally across the water, it whispered her name. Emma. Her heart stopped cold. She hadn't told anyone in this town her name. She scrambled back inside, locking the door, her mind racing. Sleep was impossible. The next morning she found wet, muddy footprints on her porch, small ones, leading right up to her door. That's when the dreams began. Night after night, she saw herself standing by the river, whispering into the black water. Pale, slow hands would reach up from beneath the surface, pulling her down, down, down. Every night the dream ended the same way. She would wake up gasping for air, her throat raw, her pillow damp as if she'd been crying underwater. One morning she found mud on her own feet. She hadn't left the bed. Desperate for answers, she went into town and found the only person who seemed willing to speak, an old woman named Agatha who ran the general store. Agatha's eyes were pale and empty, the eyes of someone who had seen far too much. "You live by the river?" she asked, her voice a dry rasp. When Emma nodded, Agatha let out a heavy sigh. "Then it's already chosen you. Hollow Creek feeds on voices, on those who listen. It calls you in your own name until you answer, and when you do, you join the current." Emma left the store completely shaken. That night, she sealed her windows, bolted her doors, and cranked up the radio, hoping to drown out any sound from the outside. But around midnight, the static on the radio began to change. Faint whispers started threading their way through the noise. Emma. Emma, please help me. It was the child's voice again, pleading, desperate. She covered her ears, hot tears streaming down her face. "You're not real," she sobbed, but the voice answered softly, right in her ear. "You came here to write stories, didn't you? Then write ours." The next morning she found something on the shore, an old wooden toy boat. Half-read, its name barely visible on the side. Elias, against her better judgment, she brought it inside. That night, the whispers grew louder. They weren't coming from outside anymore, they were coming from the very walls of the cabin. She pressed her ear to the floorboards and heard it all, crying, then laughter, then a deafening silence. Her reflection in the window didn't move when she did. The fog outside had thickened into a solid white sea. When she tried to call the realtor, the phone line only hissed with static. At 3 a.m., the humming began again, this time from inside the cabin. The candlelight flickered violently, and in the corner of the room, she saw him. The child from across the river. His skin was gray, his eyes were black, hollow pits, and water dripped from his clothes onto the floor. "You found my boat," he said, his voice small and broken. "Now come find me." And then he was gone, leaving only a trail of wet footprints leading to the door. Against every instinct screaming inside her, Emma followed. The fog outside swallowed her whole. The ground beneath her feet felt soft, pulsing, as if it were alive. The river was louder now, the whispers clearer. They weren't random anymore. They were names, hundreds of them, echoing in different tones. Men, women, children, all of them crying, all of them calling. And then she heard her name again. "Emma, Emma, please." The voice came from the middle of the river. She waded in, the icy water biting at her skin. The deeper she went, the more the current tugged at her legs. "Where are you?" she shouted into the fog. "Show yourself." In response, the surface broke. A pale hand shot up, grabbing her wrist. But it wasn't pulling her down. It was offering. Through the rippling black water, she saw them. Countless faces staring up at her, their mouths open in silent screams. And in that horrifying moment, she finally understood. Hollow Creek wasn't just haunted, it was hungry. The river didn't drown, people had collected them. She tore her arm free and stumbled back to shore, collapsing in the mud as the whispers turned to angry screams, echoing through the trees. She ran back to the cabin, slammed the door, and leaned against it, gasping for breath. On her table lay her notebook, open to a page she hadn't written. The words were scrawled in wet ink. Asterisk, you promised to tell our story. Asterisk, the pages began to turn on their own. Faster and faster, until they stopped on a fresh, blank one. The pen on the table lifted, and with a life of its own, it began to write. She screamed as invisible hands guided the ink. Asterisk, she returned to the water. Asterisk, the front door burst open, and the fog poured in like smoke. The candle went out. When the villagers found the cabin the next morning, it was empty. There was no sign of Em, only her notebook, open to the last page. The final words read, asterisk, the river remembers. Asterisk, after that night, the fog never truly lifted from Hollow Creek again. The townspeople stopped going near the water, though sometimes, late at night, they would hear her voice calling softly from the riverbank. Please, she would whisper. I only wanted to write. Those who followed the sound never came back. Years later, the realtor sold the cabin again, to another writer who said he didn't believe in ghosts. The locals gave him the same warning, the same uneasy glance. But Hollow Creek always waits patient, silent, and listening. They say if you walk by the river under a full moon, you can still see shapes moving beneath the surface, faces, staring upward, mouths open, as if still trying to speak. And if you lean close enough, you might hear them whispering your name, asking for just one thing, to be remembered. But if you listen for too long, the current changes. The water reaches up, and before you realize it, the whisper you're hearing isn't theirs anymore, it's yours. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Stay safe out there.